Hello everyone and welcome to my next presentation. I am Dr. Claire and I am at Center for Life Chiropractic. Today's topic is going to be just some tips for ache-free yard work. I know that the weather's getting warmer and people are eager to go outside and start getting their yard in order. So here are just some tips for today, just to make sure that you can prevent injury when you go outside and start doing some yard work. And then I'm also going to include some stretches that you can do beforehand just to prevent injury. So a few things to consider. You always want to be mindful of your body position, especially while lifting, twisting, reaching, carrying, and mowing. The best thing to do is in these positions is to really just activate your core so that you're not shutting down certain muscle groups and using others and then putting strain on those muscle groups. You want to also make sure or be mindful that how and what you do affects your joints. So if you're lifting too much or pushing too much or pulling too much, you are putting strain on your joints and you're gonna have those effects later on. So also warm up and stretch. You never want to go in and just start doing physical activity on any kind of cold joints or muscles. It's not the best thing, and then that's where you get yourself more prone to injury. And then also don't overexert yourself. We've been stuck inside all winter, most of us have at least, and we haven't been doing this type of activity. So you want to just ease yourself into this so that you don't overexert and you don't injure yourself. So some tips for pain-free gardening. Always wear supportive shoes. You're doing a lot of activity outside. There's probably a lot of uneven ground surface, so you want to just make sure that you have that kind of support under your feet, as well as maintaining proper posture, sitting upright. Like I said before, make sure to just engage your core so you're not focusing on using just solely your back muscles, as well as your pelvic muscles, so that you're not straining those guys. Avoid hot times, and this would be typically the best time to go outside is before 10 a.m. or after 6 p.m., and this varies by region. But you want to just make sure that you're out of the sun. If it's a cloudy day, then that's okay. But if it's too hot and too sunny, you want to just make sure and be mindful of these time frames. Use both sides of your body when you're doing work. You want to activate both sides of the brain as well as just engaging both sides of your body so that you can have equilibrium as well as working on your balance and you're not focusing on certain muscle groups that are just on one side of the body. Wear protective eyewear. Things are going to be flying most likely, so you want to protect your eyes, and this can be in the form of sunglasses or goggles. If you don't have hair, I would advise wearing a hat. Even people who do have hair, they can still get sunburn on the top of their head, especially where that part line is. So it's just advisable to wear a hat all the time when you're outside, especially if it's really sunny and clear outside. Make sure that your toes or your shoes, are closed-toed so that if anything falls on your foot or you accidentally run into something, that you're not going to be spraining or even fracturing your toes. Wear garden gloves to help prevent any kind of cuts or scrapes or unwanted injury, especially if you're going to be using any kind of chemicals. You don't want to have any burns. And then it's just important to stay hydrated with pure water. I'm not talking about caffeine or any kind of soda or pop, however you want to call it. And it's important just to stay hydrated because as you are doing more physical activity and the temperatures are rising, your body is just getting rid of water that much faster, so you want to replenish that. So when picking up objects properly, I wanted to make a point of this in here. You always want to bend at the knees, and I don't care what kind of weight it is. It's the physical movement itself. So bend at the knees, and while you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're engaging your core, so just actively, squeezing in your stomach muscles. Keep your back straight as possible, and then once you lift the object, you want to make sure that you squeeze your glutes as you come up, and never, never, never twist at the waist. Once you lift that object, you want to lift it and then turn your entire body, because if you twist at the waist, that's where you make yourself more prone to some kind of injury within the low back and then pelvic region. And some pointers when using heavy equipment. If the piece of equipment that you're using has a strap on it, I would advise to throw that on just to help balance out the weight between both shoulders or both sides of the body. You want to switch, if you don't have that option, you can switch sides to utilize both sides of your body. And then as well as purchasing ergonomic or renting ergonomic tools that are a little bit more designed for the human body and safer movement patterns. Use your entire body weight while pushing objects, especially if you're wheelbarrowing, heavy, anything heavy, and then as well as a lawnmower if you don't have a motorized push mower or a rider mower. And then with lawnmower pull cords, if you do still have one of those, just bend at the knees and pull from front to back. Try not to bend sideways, and then as you pull the cord, twisting at your waist, because that'll just make you more prone to pulling muscles and straining muscles within your back and low back as well as your pelvis. And then you always want to wear hearing protection because this equipment is very loud and you don't want to hurt your ears. So here's 10 different stretches that I'm going to talk about that I think will be really good and beneficial before going out and doing yard work. These you can also use and incorporate into other daily activities, such as before you go out, get your day started, or before you go for exercise, anything. So the first one is just to stretch the upper part of the trapezius, so the top of the shoulders, and then into the back side of the shoulders and even into the forearm. I'm not going to go into detail about all of these. The pictures are pretty self-explanatory. If you need to pause this so that you can practice it, be my guest. The side stretch is a really good one for just helping open up the muscles of the pectorals, the lats and the serratus, which are found more posterior. Lat is a little bit further down in the back, and the serratus is a little bit higher. Working the upper mid-back and then oblique muscles as well in this one, which are kind of hard areas to stretch. So this is definitely one that we want to incorporate, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of lifting or any kind of like pulling or pushing movements. The tricep one is something that we don't really think about too often because it's on the back side of us, and typically we don't look at our backsides that often. So you want to just make sure to go in and stretch the tricep muscles as well to prevent any kind of injury. The forearm is really important. You're going to be using your hands a lot, I'm sure, and your arms while you're doing yard work. So the best thing to do is this one, you want to do it in both directions to actively engage the wrists and then as well as the fingers. So here in the picture, she kind of has her fingers curled in. What you want to do is just stretch out your fingers so that you can get a better stretch out of all the flexor and extensor tendons, which are in the forearm and wrist. And do both sides. So see how she's pushing the hand down? Then what you want to do is just take your hand and lift it up, and then apply your opposite hand over the fingers on the downside, and then pull them towards you to kind of stretch out the underside of the forearm. The bicep stretch, I wouldn't recommend doing it this way unless you really want to. I would perform this in a doorway where you just hold the frame of the door and then lean forward, and you can keep your arms at exactly 180 degrees, or you can bring them all the way up or down depending upon what kind of stretch you want to get out of that. But this really works the muscles of the bicep, and then as well as even into the chest with the pectoral region. So getting into some of the lower body stretches, this one is good for the muscles of the low back, as well as into the hip extensors a little bit, which are on the posterior back side of the legs. We can't forget our core, because we need to be actively engaging this while we're doing certain movements. So the press up is really good for just stretching out the anterior, the front abdominals, and then even into a little bit of the upper pelvic region. You can do this two ways too. You can do a light stretch and a stronger stretch, where you just, if you do the light one, you're just on your elbows, and then you can look up at the ceiling to really get into the front of the neck muscles as well. And then you can push off your elbows and still look up at the top of the ceiling to really actively get a better stretch out of that. But work up to it. You don't want to go in and stretch too far and risk injuring yourself. The hamstring stretch is a good one. So with this one, if you're new to it, I would contact the back of the leg, and as you get more limber, I would progress on to holding the back of the knee, and then down into the calf, foot, or ankle, depending upon your flexibility. to really get a good stretch out of this, you can extend your foot for the best stretch. So that's where you're just going to bring your toes towards you, and this will really get into the hamstring as well as the calf region. The lunge is really good for the forward hip flexors, so the anterior hip flexors of the leg. With this one, you can stay in a neutral position like this guy is in the picture, but you can also, if you want to maximize this, lean forward while keeping your back upright, to bend that top knee there that's off the floor, and then get the knee that's on the floor, that leg, you want to make sure get that a little bit straighter, and then you'll feel an even deeper stretch within those hip flexors. So another good one for the lower leg, if you can't get in the hamstring stretch, if you can't get all the way down to touching the calf or the ankle, this is a really good one. Just holding onto a chair and making sure that both feet are flat on the floor and kind of lean forward a little bit. If you don't want to do it this way and you're outside, you can always just find a curb and just put your foot up onto it so that the sole of the foot, so your heel is on, say, the pavement, and then your toes are up on the curb, and then just push into it with your body weight a little bit. So that was just a quick little presentation, but I think it's really important because there are a lot of injuries that occur when people start to go out and they're all excited, and then they just lift something improperly, they move improperly, all those different things. So go ahead, enjoy the beauty of the outdoors safely, everyone, and I hope you learned something from this presentation. And if you have any questions, you can always just comment below, or our contact information was back on that first slide. Thanks again.